We're doing watercolor Q&A today. You guys have questions and I can make up answers. Mostly I know the answers, but you're also getting my interpretation of the questions, which, take that for what it's worth. I have come to realize that I don't always interpret things correctly in text. That's a different story. Anyway, okay, so I compiled all your questions, like as many as I could, and I kind of categorized them into three main groups. And we're gonna look at each group individually. So the first group is supplies, the second group is technique, and the third group is philosophy. I also found two questions that were just specific to me about like future plans for content and watercolor, and I will answer those at the end. So first question, brushes. I have a cheat sheet. What type? Just for watercolor, or can acrylic or mixed media brushes work as well? Okay, so I sell watercolor brushes. Those brushes are made for watercolor. They have synthetic bristles, they hold lots of water, and they have a really nice point on them. For me, a brush that's made just for watercolor is always going to be better than a brush that's made for acrylic. If a brush for acrylic is the only thing that you have access to, it's gonna be fine. You can do it. You can paint with watercolor with whatever brush you want to paint with watercolor in, but a watercolor brush is always going to give you sort of an easier experience and a better result. Now, can you use watercolor brushes for other mediums? I'm gonna say, sure, why not? But I don't recommend mixing the two. So if I use this brush for acrylic, now I've got acrylic paint that's in there that you really can't ever get completely out of a brush. And that's gonna make the brush hold the water differently. It's gonna make the bristles stiffer. It's just gonna change the experience with the brush. So I do try to keep my brushes separate. Watercolor brushes, acrylic brushes, oil brushes, totally different story. Definitely need to keep all three separate. Next question. Could you give some helpful hints on paper and how to choose it? Absolutely. I think paper makes a bigger difference for watercolor than even the brushes or the paints. Like, I think the paper is probably the most important thing. That said, I am not as rigid in my paper recommendations as some watercolor artists. There are plenty of people out there that will tell you you should only be painting on 100% cotton paper, and I disagree, because it can be cost prohibitive for some users. So I want everybody to paint, and I don't want you to feel like you can't paint on your special paper because it's so expensive and then you don't practice. Here's what I do think is important about paper. It needs to be watercolor paper. If you try to paint on printer paper or cardstock, it's gonna bleed through the paper, it's not gonna give you vibrant colors, and you're not gonna get the blending that you can get on watercolor paper. So I always recommend that you look for something that says watercolor paper, not mixed media paper, not drawing paper, watercolor paper, and look for 140-pound cold pressed. What's the difference between cold pressed and hot pressed? So glad you asked. Cold press is gonna have more tooth to it, so it's gonna have more texture. Hot press is like totally smooth and doesn't have any texture, and it is way less forgiving, in my opinion, than cold press paper. So I always say start with cold press. I used to have some hot press paper and I looked for it to show it to you as an example and I could not find it. I think maybe I used it for like scrap paper because I did not like it. Now that is personal opinion. So watercolor paper, 140-pound cold press. The poundage, the 140 pound, is gonna be the thickness of the paper. I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see this, but that is 140 pound. That is 300 pound. Can you see the difference? 300-pound paper is like, it is like so thick. The 140-pound is like medium thick. Anything under 140 pound is gonna be thinner. My practice book has thinner paper. It is not 140 pound, it is 120 pound. So slightly thinner than the Canson paper that I showed you. So why did I do that if I say you should paint on 140 pound? Well, I did it because this is a practice book and because I wanted to fit more pages in the book. So 120 pound is gonna be thinner. It's still gonna work great. It's still not gonna bleed through. You're not gonna see it on the other side. But for me, this is more practice paper than like a finished piece kind of paper. So already I've broken the rule. If it's not a practice situation, I look for 140 pound or higher. Now, beyond that, like this is 100% cotton paper. Canson is not 100% cotton paper, and this is what I recommend all the time for new people because this is inexpensive. This paper is made from wood pulp. Cotton paper is wonderful to paint on, but it costs more money. So you have to decide. You have to figure out if you're going to be okay with using the more expensive paper for practicing when you're first learning. And sometimes there's cotton paper that you think is going to be great that is not great. I do not love this paper. This paper is 100% cotton. It's the 300 pound really thick paper, and you would think it would be great, but it's so soft. It pulps up very easily, and this, I don't like painting on this. I would rather paint on the Canson paper. For the really high-end paper, I pretty much always go with Arches or Fabriano Artistico. These are beautiful to paint on, and they are expensive. Again, it's up to you. This question is also related to paper. This person wants to know, how do you know the limit of the water that your paper can take before it's oversaturated and hopeless? This is a good question and a hard one to answer because sometimes when you're a brand new painter and you are really working on something, you have a tendency to think like, I can fix it. And you keep working at it, keep throwing more and more water at it. And you can get to that point of no return with your paper where it just becomes like a pulpy mess. This does happen more often with the less expensive papers than with the higher end papers, but it can happen with any paper. So it is really something that you learn as you go through experience. I would say my biggest piece of advice with water control and like using too much water is that if you think you are approaching that point of too much water, you need to just stop and let it dry. And that's a hard one. And I think you've seen it before from me when I'm doing tutorials and I'm like, I should stop. I should just stop. I'm going to stop. And I don't stop. I just keep going because you get in that mindset of like, I have to fix this. This can't exist in the world this way. But it's really better to just leave it and let it dry because it can be kind of hard to know that point of like the tipping point of I've ruined the paper. If it starts to look like the paper is breaking down and you're seeing like little bits of the paper, you've gone too far and you need to stop. And that doesn't mean that you can't bring it back. Like sometimes when it dries, it will still be okay as long as you don't hit that spot again. So that's the not great advice. It's not easy to follow, but that's all I've got is you gotta just like hold your horses, let it dry, and see where you're at. Next question. Someone asked what my go-to tubes are for watercolor paints. This is my bin of tubes, and I will tell you that I have lots of different brands in here. But my absolute favorite is probably Daniel Smith. So Daniel Smith is a higher end paint company. It's lovely to paint with. It is more expensive. So a tube like this a lot of times is gonna cost over $10, which if you're getting like a whole pan of 24 for 40, you know, paying $10 for a color is expensive. And a lot of them are even more than that. So with the tube paints, I suggest you go for the colors that don't come in your set that you know you're going to use all the time. Or like if you want to mix up a whole bunch of one color, then having a tube paint is a really useful tool for that. But I tend to just choose the colors that are like my favorite colors. So like green gold is a color that does not come in my set that I haven't been able to recreate that I love. So I will put this into a pan and use a tube. You can buy the little pans like this, and then you just squeeze the paint out into the pan, and now you have that color. I did make a video about tube paints, and I can link that for you with more information, but essentially you just fill it up, you use a toothpick to kind of squish it around to make sure it gets in all the corners, you let it dry, you do like half at a time, let it dry, and then do the other half on top. And then you can put it in your set. Once you fill the pan, you can either try to squeeze it into the set that you're already using, or you can buy an extra tin to put those pans into. And then you've got like a custom palette. The next question is also about tube paints and filling your own pans. And this person wanted to know why their pans always crack. When they fill a pan with tube paints, why does it crack? Could be a couple things. It could be that you're overfilling it and not letting like the individual layers dry. Like I said, to fill it like halfway full, let it dry, and then top it off with more. Sometimes you can get like uneven drying if you fill the entire pan all at once, and then that can cause cracks. It could also be the brand that you're using. Some of the lower quality paints are more likely to crack than the higher end paints. But here's the thing. Even if it cracks, it still works. Like, it's still gonna be fine. As long as it's not crumbling and leaving like big chunks in your painting or like falling out in your palette. If it's just like a crack or two down the middle, it is not gonna impact the way that the paint functions. Next question is, how do I clean the colors off of my watercolors when I mess up in this way? I think I know what you mean. I think you're talking about this. You're talking about when you get a color in the other color. This happens with yellow all the time, where you end up with a little bit of green and you're like, but I wanted yellow, not chartreuse. So then how do you clean that out? It is very simple. You're gonna get a paper towel, little clean water, and then all you do is dab at the paint until you've lifted off all of that color that you don't want. No more chartreuse. So that's it. You just wipe it out. You just get a little damp paper towel and dab it. Don't like scrape at it or scrub it, but just kind of dab at it and it should come right out. But I want to talk about this idea of when you mess up in this way. It is not messing up. To get paint in your paint pan is not messing up. It happens to everybody. It just means that you dipped into a color and you didn't fully rinse your brush before you dipped into another color because you were really involved in the process of painting and you were having fun. So that's not a mess up. That's just something that happens when you paint. So let's let go of this idea of messing up in art. We're not messing up in art. We are experiencing art and we are learning through that experience. But I promise you, you're not messing up, and nothing that you're doing in your art practice is something that is unique to you. People have done this for ages. Every single artist I know who paints in watercolor has mixed up their colors. Be easy on yourself. Next question. Thoughts on watercolor pencils. My thoughts on watercolor pencils are that I don't use them that often. People ask me about them constantly. For me, I prefer water-soluble pastels because I think you get a nicer, smoother, paintier line than you do with watercolor pencils. But there are lots of people who use them and love them. Some people like to use them for their sketches so that the sketch will sort of blend in. But in my experience, when you use watercolor pencils, there's always going to be at least some line left. It's never going to totally disappear. So that's what you have to know going into it. Watercolor pencils just aren't my go-to thing, but it's like to each his own, right? Some people love it and some people don't, and it's not my personal favorite, so that's why you don't see me use it. Next question. How can we label the colors if we aren't familiar with it yet? I think you mean like if you have a paint set and someone says, we're gonna use indigo, how do you know which one is indigo if you're not familiar with the paint set? So that is why you swatch your colors, and that is why you swatch your colors on the little sheet that comes with it. So I swatch my colors in the order that they are on the paint palette, and then you would have to write really tiny, but you can write the names of the colors on your swatch card or like on the back, on the coordinating color. I would write lemon yellow right there so that I could easily see it. To me, that's the easiest way to do it. Because trying to label anything in here is going to make it really difficult to just quickly reference the colors. So like I could say, I'm going to take the little sticker that's on the paint set and I'm going to put it on the bottom of my pan, but then I have to take the pan out to see what color it is, which is not like super useful. And it's going to get all painty and sticky if you're painting a lot. So my recommendation is really to use a swatch card that is in the same order as the paint set in the pan so that you can reference it. But you are going to learn the paints based on using the paints. And in my personal paint practice, I don't really care what a paint is called. I just use the paint color that I know to be the one that I want. And the way that I know that it is the one that I want is because I just know what color is in the palette. So to be honest with you, sometimes I get confused on the greens, and sometimes I will say this is tree green when really it is grass green, because I don't really think about the colors in terms of their color names when I'm painting. I only think of them in that way when I am talking to you guys about what color to use. There are plenty of people out there who are obsessed with color names and pigments and all of that stuff. And I love that for them. That's just not the way that I personally paint. Even when I'm painting something that is like a more finished piece, or when I was painting things to sell, I didn't really care about what color was what color. So for your practice, you kind of have to figure out what's important to you. And if you paint enough, you're gonna learn what color is what very quickly. Okay, this is the last one in the supplies category, and it's kind of like a good segue into technique because it kind of covers both. I'm gonna read it. Can we use acrylic and watercolor in the same piece? And if so, how? I'm obsessed with fluorescent pink acrylic, and I thought it would be a cool feature in a painting with watercolors. Me too. I love, love, love using hot pink in my paintings. And I love the pink that's like in my set, but sometimes you want a pink that's like pink. So the answer to the question is yes, absolutely. You can do whatever you want. If you want to use pink acrylic or pink feathers on your watercolor, you could do that. You get to choose. So the bear that I did last summer, I used acrylic and watercolor on this painting. So this is like 98% watercolor. And then I used a little bit of pink, hot pink acrylic on the top. There's some gold acrylic, and this teal color that's in here was also acrylic. So technically this is a mixed media piece because I used different types of paint. You can do whatever you want. It's your painting. If you put acrylic on top of watercolor, you're not gonna be able to see the watercolor underneath. And if you try to put watercolor on top of acrylic, it is hit or miss. Like I did it in that Create, Destroy, Create video, and it worked pretty well, but honestly, like that is not like a go-to move for me. So I would say if you want to mix watercolor and acrylic, it's always best to start with watercolor and use acrylic on top for whatever, like highlights or whatever you want to do, and just know that you're going to cover a lot of the watercolor up with the acrylic. Next one's kind of supplies and technique too. But the person was asking how you get your painting to lay flat if it's buckled. So first thing is, if it's buckling really, really bad, then you might want to look at the type of paper. So you might want thicker paper or a better quality paper. You also want to make sure that you're doing a very good job of taping your paper down if it's buckling a lot, because that will definitely help. But some level of buckling is just normal with watercolor because you're throwing all kinds of watercolor and paint at paper, and it's just natural to get some ripples in it. So here's an example. So the postcards, they lay pretty flat. I did not tape this down when I painted it, so it buckled a little bit. If I wanted this to be completely flat, I could spray the back of the painting with a little bit of water, lay it down on something flat, and then just pile a bunch of books on top of it and leave it. You probably want to put a towel or something between the book and the painting. leave it for a couple days, and when you come back, it should be flattened out. If you want to speed that process, same thing, spray the back with a little bit of water, lay it on a flat surface, put a towel on top, and then use a warm iron, and you can iron it. And that will help flatten it out. But also, like, it's art, it's homemade. You made it with your own human hands. And a little bit of rippling that's normal. It's fine. Especially if it's a postcard, it's gonna go through the mail and gosh, who knows how it's gonna get there, right? Like that's okay. So continuing on with technique, the next question is, painting trees is so difficult and then adding the sky. Should I put the sky in first and then paint the trees, or try and paint the sky after, which can sometimes be difficult? Okay, the first thing is this idea of should. Should I do this or should I do that? There is no rule here. So there's no like should or shouldn't. You get to choose based on the look you want for your painting and whatever painting process feels best to you. So I paint it both ways. Sometimes, like this one, I painted the tree and then I just painted the sky around it, and you can still see white showing through, and that is one effect, right? This is a very loose style of painting. Having the white of the paper peek through is, I think, very appropriate for this painting where I have white peeking through on the trunk. This is one way to do it. For something like this, I painted the background in first, and then I did the line of trees over the top of the background. So it's a different look, right? It's a different look, but it still works. Like there's no, oh, you shouldn't have done it that way, you should have done it that way. It is just a different technique and a different process. The more you paint, the more you're gonna figure out what you like. And that's how you decide if you put the sky in first or if you do it after. Next question. Why doesn't my wet on wet work like yours? Explain dry paper watercolor versus wetting the watercolor and what each one does. So wet on wet is a technique that you use where you put water down first and then you add the paint. If you add wet paint to wet water, water's always wet, you know what I mean? The paint is gonna flow within that water, so you are gonna have no control over where the paint goes in that water. If you take paint and put it on dry paper, you are going to control where that paint goes. So it is going to go wherever your brush touches, and it's not going to travel outside of that area. With water, it's going to go wherever the water is. If you want a nice soft edge and you want colors to mix on the paper within the water, then wet on wet is the way to go. And if you want to really control the paint and you want crisp edges, like sharp edges to your paint, then you're going to go wet on dry. Why doesn't it work for you the way that it works for me? Most of the time, the reason for that is going to be that you don't have enough water on the paper, or you don't have enough water on your paints, like your paints are not wet enough, or your brush is not wet enough. So you want a wet brush going into really, really soaking wet paints, touching a nice wet part of your paper, and that's how you get the burst. Also, some paints are gonna do that push into the water more than other paints, but most of the time it has to do with the amount of water you're using. How about shading? How do I get the scale and perspective right and the colors to use? So shading, I think you mean like lights and darks. That's what I'm assuming. So if you look at something like this, where there is a very distinct light side and dark side, you have to identify your light source, right? So you have to know where the light is coming from in order to know which parts of your object are going to be highlighted and which ones are going to be in shadow. And then you're just going to darken those areas in whatever way you want. So for this, my shadows are in watercolor, but I also have some water-soluble pastels on there and some colored pencils on this shadow side to make it even darker. In watercolor, you're always going to work light to dark. So you're always going to try to maintain your lightest areas and then darken up your darker areas as you go. By using lights and darks, you are going to give it more dimension. As far as the colors that you use, that's really going to depend on the style that you're going for and your own sort of artistic voice. In this one, you can see that I used like a really, really dark gray, but then in the shadow, I actually added a little bit of a blue highlight to distinguish the strawberry from the shadow. So that is just sort of an artistic choice. But shadows don't have to be gray or black. Like in my pears, I used purple. And that was a choice that I made just because there was a lot of yellow happening in my pears, and I thought the complement to yellow, which is purple, would make for a nice shadow. So you don't have to be limited to just grays and blacks. You can venture outside of that, but a lot of it's going to come from your own intuition and your own artistic voice, like what you want to see happen. And so much of that comes from just trial and error. Like I didn't know for a fact that purple was going to work as a shadow, but I figured I'd try it. And if it didn't work, I could always go over it with some gray and you'd never even know that the purple was there. So sometimes you just have to experiment. We're ready to move on to the next sort of category, which is philosophy. So these were more like broad questions about making art. And the first one that I have is, how do you get back in the groove of a project with the same focus or mindset as when you started? For example, if you're doing a painting and really feeling it and in the groove of it, but then you have to stop because of life, that does happen. How do you get back into the mindset again? Sometimes if I'm really passionate about a painting and I have to stop, I feel less passionate about it when it's time to pick it back up. Okay. This is something that I struggle with myself, and I think it is the reason that I like watercolor so much, because most of the time I can start a watercolor painting and I can finish it in the same sitting. Most of the time, not always. I do find it hard to return to a project once I've left it. That is why the mushrooms stayed on the easel for like 6 months. And I think part of it is because you are not going to return to it with the same mindset. Probably when you were working on it, you got into the flow state, right? Where you were really into what you were doing. You were barely even thinking about the outside world. And then somebody came and said, "Mom, I need a snack," or whatever. It is not easy to get back into that state again when you have time to work on something. So I think you just have to know going into it that it's not going to just be an automatic thing where you just jump right back where you left off. But I also think that's kind of a good thing, because a lot of times you can return to a painting with fresh eyes. You can see it in a new way. It might look way better to you than when you were first working on it. It might not. It might look like it needs more work than you remember. That's okay too. But the point is to just come back to it and just start working on it. That's really the only advice that I have, is like, you just have to start. If you wait for that moment of feeling the same feeling that you had when you put it down, it might not come. Like, you kind of have to create that moment yourself. And the only way to create that is by starting. Nobody starts in the flow state. You have to get there. But this does kind of go with the next question, which was tips or hints for storage or readiness for when you want to paint, but you don't have a lot of time. And she says, like, creating a travel paint setup, but for home. So this is something that I have been trying to do, because a lot of times I get stuck doom scrolling like right before bed, which is not what I want to be doing before I go to sleep. And I've been in a reading slump. I'm a reader. I like to read, and normally I read a book before I go to bed, and that helps like chill my brain out so I can sleep. But I've been in a reading slump and I haven't been able to find any books that I'm really into. I'll take your recommendations. So I thought, well, maybe if I practice drawing or painting or whatever, like at night, maybe that would be a good nighttime activity. But like, I don't want to I call it the nest on the couch because we have like the reclining couch, and I just get in my little pod of the couch with my blankie and my big giant thing of water, and I just don't want to get out of there. So I've just started keeping a travel size sketchbook and a couple of pens right next to the couch. And I don't feel like normally I can face like painting at night, but I can sketch and I can work on drawing people and trying techniques that maybe I haven't tried before with cross hatching or whatever it might be. But having one little sketchbook and one, like, I think there's 2 pens down there next to my sketchbook. I have been making things that I wouldn't normally make, actually. So it's been kind of a good experiment. I also have a travel size paint set, a 12 color paint set with some water brush pens and my little collapsible cup and my travel brush that I keep on the second level of the house, because this is the art room is on the top floor, so downstairs, so that if the mood strikes me, I can just grab it and pick it up. But I know a lot of people don't have like extra paint supplies. I sell paint supplies, so there are plenty. There are plenty here. But I know that's not always feasible for people. But I think having like even just a pen and a notepad or some crayons or colored pencils or just something so that you can start, so that you can make an idea and then maybe you come back to that thing with paints later. I think it can't hurt, right? It's at least something to like get your brain started or give you that little outlet that you need when you don't have a lot of time. Next question. What do I do if I can't draw? Well, I would say that I have gotten better at drawing over the years, but drawing has never been like my strong suit. And I traced, and I don't think there's anything wrong with tracing. I know for a fact it's been shown that tracing helps build your drawing skills. So I'm a big proponent of tracing. If you want to paint, then drawing should not be a barrier to painting. There is going to be a video on Patreon later this month where I'm going to show you different ways to trace a reference photo or a line drawing, but you can use a window, you can get carbon paper or tracing paper, you can scribble with a crayon on the back of your printed out line drawing and then lay it on top of your watercolor paper and trace, and it will transfer the lead from the pencil onto your paper. That's a great method. And there are Lightbox apps on an iPad that you can use for tracing too. But I would say just don't be afraid to trace things. It's totally fine. It's going to help train your brain to connect to your hand. It'll help you recognize the shapes that you see. It's a very valid way of learning to draw, and I see absolutely nothing wrong with it. Also, there are plenty of things that you can paint that don't require any drawing at all. I have 1,000,001 tutorials where I don't draw anything. We just go straight in with the paint, and that's another great method. Next question. How do you get over failure and lack of confidence? So first of all, I would say there is no failure. There is only trying. It's like the opposite of Yoda. The only way to learn how to paint is to paint. And the idea that there are failures is, I think, categorically wrong, because you might paint something and you might not love it. You might think that it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to. But the act of trying, the act of putting paint to paper has started something. It has taught you something. And every time you do that, you are learning. And that's the only way to build your confidence, is by painting all the time until you get to a point where you're like, I'm starting to get it. So for me, that came from doing tutorials by other people. Like when I was first learning watercolor, I was taking classes by other people, and their instruction and teaching me how to do their style of painting is what led me to feel more confident to start to venture out on my own. Which leads to a bunch of the other questions, which are all related about how you get away from doing tutorials to develop your own style. So I think step one is it's fine to do tutorials. It's fine to follow the process of another artist who is trying to teach you how to paint. You can do that indefinitely. If that's what makes you happy in your painting, just keep doing that. Like there's no pressure to go any farther than that if you don't want to. There's no art police. There's nobody out there saying you have 3 more tutorials until you have to make your own. Like, it doesn't work that way. If you're comfortable doing tutorials, just keep doing it. And maybe one day you'll be like, you know what? I'm not gonna use purple, I'm gonna use pink. And then that might lead to like, I don't really like squares, I like circles. And then you make a circle. You know, that's how your style starts to develop. I did a video a while back about how you can sort of look in your surroundings and start to draw some things in your area, paint some things in your area, and how that will sort of help you learn how to paint on your own. That video is available. I do think drawing things from every day is a great way to learn what your style is. I have talked about it 1,000,001 times, but Samantha Dion Baker's book, How to Draw Your Day, is my favorite book for learning how to just sit down and paint when you don't know what to paint. Because you can literally look at anything in your world and start there. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be super simple. And it can also be really therapeutic. And I have said this so many times, but that book is what got me through my kid going to college and leaving home. It's what got me into like a daily practice of making art. So I think books can be a great resource along with like online tutorials, but just drawing things and painting them from your everyday life is a great way to learn what you like and how you like to create. On that same note though, I do want to pick this one part out of this question where the person said, whenever I venture out and do some completely original art, I hate it. It never matches or even approaches the vision I had in my head, whereas with tutorials, I'm usually pretty stoked about my results. This is a thing that happens with artists where when you're learning how to paint, how to draw, whatever it is, there is a period of time where there's a gap between what is in your head and what you can put on the paper. You just don't have the skills to do it yet. You haven't practiced enough. I feel like I am living in that gap with people, drawing people. Drawing in general, I still feel like I'm in that gap where I'm like, I can't quite make my hand do what I want it to do. That is a real space where you have grand ideas for what you want something to be and you just can't quite execute it. So the only way, again, to get past that is to keep creating. That is the only way. It's practice. And I think a lot of times people think, well, I don't have the right materials or I haven't been told the right technique. And there's only a little truth to that. The bulk of the truth is that it's you. You have to practice. You have to put the time in. It's not going to be like an easy transition from I don't know how to paint to I do know how to paint. There's a lot of things that you have to figure out in between. And the more you can let go of that feeling of like immediacy of I have to be able to do this right now, the better your experience is going to be with painting. So just having fun with it, realizing that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to match the vision in my head. I just did a video, I haven't posted it yet, but I just did a video where I was talking about how I'm still in this stage of like, I can draw a person that looks like a person, but I can't draw a person that looks like that person. So like when I'm looking at the reference photo, my drawing doesn't doesn't ever look like the reference photo person, like the features, you know? But the fact that I can look at a reference photo and make something that looks like a person is progress. That's the way you have to be able to look at it. You have to say like, well, maybe I couldn't make it look like I envisioned it in my head, but I did make it look like an apple. That's progress. And next time I do it, it might look a little bit more like what I had in my head. Last two questions were the me questions, which are we going to do another practice book series? Eventually, for sure, yes. Right now, definitely no. The thing that people don't realize with that is that it took me so long to do that whole series because I have to come up with the idea, I have to figure out how to teach the idea, and then the practice book is huge. Like, to fill this much space in every tutorial, it just took a really long time, and I am sick of it. I'm sick of the practice book. That's why I want to do postcards, because I'm like, I don't want to do practice book stuff right now. I want to do smaller paintings, something that feels more manageable. Yes, we will is the answer. Not right now. To give you the mom response, maybe. Ask me later. We also might just do like a sketchbook series, like in this book. We might do something in the travel size book. I don't know. We will do another book series. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to do postcards for right now. And the other me question was, will I do an art retreat? And that is a no, 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 no. For those who have been around for a minute, I went to Spain last year on an art retreat. It was not a great experience. I came back in a major art funk. And it really made me think that I will never do, like, personally probably won't go on another art retreat, maybe, but definitely I don't want to host one. I don't want to be responsible for people. I don't want that level of pressure, and no, it's not for me. It's not for me. No. I did not cover all the questions. I had to pick and choose because there were a lot. So if I didn't get to yours, I apologize, but I think we covered a ton. Hopefully it wasn't too long. I do just kind of want to leave you with my number one tip for new artists, which is don't overcomplicate things. Don't feel like you have to have every single supply and know every single technique in order to be able to start the process of learning to paint. Because again, the only way you're going to learn to paint is by painting. You can watch every single tutorial. You can take every watercolor class that there is, but until you put paintbrush to paper, you cannot learn to paint. Just start playing around with it. Most of what I paint comes from like the ideas swirling in my head, the stuff that is around me in my world, and it is based on intuition and playfulness and curiosity about how the materials are going to work together. A lot of times I'm just throwing paint down to see what will happen. And sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't. And if I don't, it's fine. I move on from it. You are not going to love everything that you paint, but you are going to love some of it. And that's the moment of pure magic. That's what you're trying to get to. Being able to play with the paint and just have a good time with it and letting go of your expectations of what it's supposed to be is what's going to lead you to the most joy and the most learning and development in your art. So just pick up a brush and just start putting color down and see what happens.